welcome. Today we'll be looking at the Sony FS7. Now, the tripod is already sitting here. I have a different video on how to assemble a professional tripod. You might want to check that out first. But so now we're going to start building the camera, and we're going to start out with the plate. Now, this particular package comes with an ENG Style Plate. ENG stands for Electronic News Gathering. The way this works is that the camera is going to seat, when you put the camera on, you're going to seat it right in here in this rectangular area, and you're going to push it forward, and it's going to hit this tab. Right now it's actually released, so we're going to charge it. You're going to charge it by pulling this red tab back and then pulling this out. You heard it click, and this pin here went away. And there's going to be a triangular piece on the camera bottom, or on the plate of the camera, and this is going to push against this piece, and then this is going to lock in place like so. But before we do that, we're going to have to put this plate onto our tripod. You can see right there, it comes with holes for 1/4 and 3/8 screws. Make sure this is tightly screwed on. Always make sure you have tools on you, a Leatherman tool. 2 screws, by the way, would be better than 1 in this case scenario. Now, to put this onto the head, every head is a little bit different, and I will show you in another video more about different heads. So right back here we have our plate release. So let me show this to you. So this right here would be if this is how it looks when the plate would be on, or when the pin that's up front here, and I'll show it to you in a sec, is released. So in order to charge it, you are going to pull down on that yellow tab, and you're going to swing it over. And what this does is it pushes this plate back. So when you are putting this plate on here, it's going to press onto this pin, and that's going to slide forward and lock it in place. So again, to charge it, you pull down this yellow tab and swing this lever over. Okay, and now we're ready to receive our plate. Now, when you are building a camera, you always really want to build a camera on a tripod, from the bottom up. The way you want to set this up is you want to make sure it's level. You want to make sure it's set up steady. You leave your pan lock open so the camera can rotate, and if you bump into the handle, it's not going to fall over. But you do lock your tilt lock. Now, in order to put this here in correctly, we bring it in front first, and then push back, push it down on the back, and that locks it in place. And before you let go, you always give it a wiggle to make sure that it's seated correctly. So up next, we are now going to make sure that this plate here is charged before we try and push our camera in. And then let me show you how this looks on the camera body. So this right here is now our camera body. You can see this triangular shape. This is what's going to fit right into here. This part is what's going to push on here. And right here in the back, you can see right here this cutout, and that's going to fit into this pin that you see right up here. Okay? So in order to put it on, I'm gonna put this straight. So in order to put this camera on, we now put it up top here, and push it forward firm and quick. And that's it. Now, before we let go, we always give it a wiggle to make sure that it's seated right. Okay, the next thing is going to be the viewfinder. So it should come out of the case looking something like this. All you do is you rotate your finder up, and you can adjust your angle right here a little bit if you like. So this is how this should look when you're done with this. Now this viewfinder connects into a connector that's positioned right here. Right here is a strain relief for the cable. Make sure that it's in here. You really don't have any reason to unplug this, but if you ever should, beware that there are two buttons on here. You have to press those two buttons to unplug this, and it will come out easy. The problem is that a lot of people seem to be thinking it's stuck, and are just yanking on that cable, and you can see right here this has already been damaged. So again, you really don't need to pull it out, but there are two buttons right here to release it if ever the need should arise. Okay, in this particular case scenario, I'll be showing you the setup of this camera as how you would set it up for raw recording. Now, so back here is this plastic plate. This plate is going to need to come off for our raw output module to go in. So this just pulls off. Don't lose it. Put it right away in the case, and then we can take a look at our raw output module. So this goes on, you have right here, this goes into the battery compartment. This would be for Sony L-mount batteries. And then up here, you have a whole number So right here you can see these electronic pins, or this electronic bracket. So these electronic pins go in there, and then the large metal pin goes right here into the middle, and the screws then screw right into here. So you seat that in there, push down on it gently, and then just screw down those two screws. I'm just going to show you the same thing from the side so you can see a different perspective. So again, this piece goes into the battery compartment, and then you just gently push down and screw it in tight. So up next, we're going to put the battery on. In this particular case, this camera is equipped with an Anton Bauer gold mount. So this right here is an Anton Bauer gold mount battery. This is just an adapter plate. You know, on a different model, you may have a V-mount battery on there. But the way this works is you have those three golden standoffs. This one goes into this hole, these two go here, and then all you do is you push the battery over and it will click in. So I'm just gonna push those in, put those in those holes, and then push over, and you will hear that battery, you know, click in. To take it off, you just press on this button right here and pull it into the opposite direction. One thing to take note of, just because the battery tells you here that it is 100% charged, does not mean that it is 100% charged. Once batteries go bad, this will read 100%, and you're still gonna end up with the camera either not powering up or powering down very quickly after it's been powered up. So if that should happen, if your camera shuts down on you, there's a really, really good chance that you need to swap batteries, okay? Even if it says right there that it's still full, you know, just don't believe what it says on here. Okay, so, and now we're ready for the lens. This right here, this camera uses a Sony E-mount, uses Sony E-mount lenses. Now, to take the port cover off, all you do is you press this button, rotate counterclockwise, and this comes off. When you do that, make sure, use a flashlight and make sure that this right here is clean, that the glass in front of your sensor is clean. If you need to clean it, you can either use these type of Zeiss cleaning wipes. There's also a lens cleaner called Eclipse, which is very good for cleaning it. Just always make sure that this is clean. Now, in this particular case, you are going to get a set of Rokinon lenses with it. There is a 35, I'm sorry, a 25, a 35, a 50, and this right here is an 85. However, these are EF mounts, which means that you will need to put them on using an adapter. So in your lens case comes a Metabones adapter. Just take the cover off, and you can see right there you have a little white dot, and also on here is a little white dot. You align the two white dots. Make sure you come in straight, don't come in from an angle. If you nick this glass, it's a very expensive repair. So come in straight, line those two white dots up, and then clockwise it locks into place. To take now the port cover off of the adapter, there's a little lever right here, push it back, release it. Then on your lens, make sure that it is clean. You should already have done this in camera prep. And then you will see right here that there is a little red mark. On the camera, or on the adapter now, you have a red mark here and a white mark there, and you align the two red marks. Now you rotate clockwise, and that will lock your lens into place. So now we have our lens on the camera. Up next, to complete our assembly, we still need to put on follow focus and matte box. In order to do that, we need to put some iris rods on. The iris rods in this particular case go into this plate right here. So you loosen this lever. These iris rods are a little bit short, but they will fit. So what I do is I always offset iris rods because it makes it easier to put equipment on. So in this case, I'll leave this one a little bit farther out, and I push this one a little bit farther back, and then we just lock this in place. And always make sure that it is tight. And you can see that it's slightly offset from one another. Okay. So the next step is going to be our follow focus. There are a lot of different types of follow focus units. In this particular case, this is what's referred to as a lightweight follow focus. A lightweight follow focus has the follow focus wheel on one side, and that always goes onto the camera operator side, which is this side. A follow focus that has two wheels on here, one here and one here, would be a studio follow focus. It's called a studio follow focus. So in this particular case, this is made by a company called MoveCam. Follow focus units have different designs, but you know, I'll just show you how to put this one on. So in this case, this screw right here is what clamps it onto your rods. This screw right there is what locks this direction in place. And then to adjust your angle, and how far up it sits on the lens, because different lenses have different diameters. You can adjust this here. Another really important piece to adjust is the gear itself. Any good follow focus will be able to change the gear to the other side. So you can take this gear right here and switch it over if you need to. But in this case, we can leave it on here. So you can see that the lens is geared. So here are some gears for your focus. Here are some gears for your iris. We rarely use that. Usually we put it onto our focus gear. So in order to put this on, we're going to slide this on from the front. And we're going to line this gear up with the gear on the lens. I'm going to lock the follow focus now onto the rods. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the distance. I'm loosening this here, and I'm going to bring this forward, and I'm going to push it against my lens gears and tighten this here in place. And in this particular case, I do not need to adjust the height. I just make sure that it's locked here, and we're all good, and we can now pull our focus with this lens gear. One thing I do want to stress is to make sure that your follow focus unit and your viewfinder sit straight, so the whole thing looks neat. Don't set this up looking like a mess. Okay, and up next we are going to put on our matte box. Again, make sure that your lens is clean. The point of a matte box is twofold. It shades your lens from any kind of light, and it also permits you to put filters in here. So you have filter stages right in there, and in this particular case, these are 4 by 5.65 filter stages, which is pretty much the most common filter size in cinematography. Also, a little less common are a 4 by 4, and then for larger lenses, also relatively common on professional film sets, are 6 by 6 filters. Also here you have this ring. This comes out by loosening this screw right here, and you can put different size rings in for different diameter lenses. In this particular case, it still leaves a little bit of a gap, and we don't want that because any light coming in from the back can bounce off your filter, your glass filter, and you can actually end up with the reflection in the glass of the lens. So you don't want that. So what we're going to put on is what's called a donut, which really is just this rubbery material, kind of like a mouse pad. And what we're going to do is we're going to push this on here. And in this particular case, it has been cut just to clear for the iris rods right there. And now we can nicely put our matte box in front of this. And we have our lens, sealed light tight from any kind of light coming from the back. We're almost done. Up top now, we are going to put our eyebrow. It's sometimes also referred to as a French flag. However, in the film industry, this is called an eyebrow. Some of them have hinges, so they open up like this. Make sure that the hinge right here is up top and not on the bottom. When you are putting it on the bottom, what can happen is that if it gets pushed down, it could actually crack your matte box. It could damage it. So make sure that this hinge sits up top. You loosen these screws right here just a little bit, and it slides right in. Then you're gonna lock it in place. and this now permits the shading of your lens. If this is too loose, this screw is going to tighten your eyebrow. And this completes the assembly of the Sony FS7. As is usually the case, all of our controls are right here on the operator side, and we will be working our way from front to back. However, to do this first, we need to turn the camera on, and the on switch is down here a little bit tucked away. Push it forward and the camera will power on. Once this is done, we're going to start and take a look right here at this big silver knob. This knob right here permits you to rotate ND filters in front of the lens. If you see some kind of like weird black thing in your viewfinder, don't sweat it. What usually happens is somebody only turned this a little bit, and it looks like something is wrong with the camera, but all you got to do is click this filter wheel in place and you'll be fine. Up here is a record start button. You also have one on top of the handle. Then right here you have several buttons that really you don't need, because these are all right here. Push auto iris. This is if you had a Sony lens on it that actually had that feature. You don't, because we are using this camera as a motion picture film camera, so we're not really interested in using it as an ENG camera. So all of this here will be disabled. Same thing here with autofocus. We don't want that. Here's some button. Same here with iris. Here's a button that is user defined, so you can go into the menu and determine what it is that you want right there. The way we're going to set up the camera, also our ISO/gain button will be disabled. Our white balance button will also be disabled. Shutter. The shutter is possible to change. You press on it. The different shutter speeds are showing up in your viewfinder at 24 frames per second or 23,976, which is what we're using. You want this to be at 1/48th of a second. Obviously, here's a button for full auto. We don't want that. Right down here, this right here, this little switch says L, M, and H for low, medium, and high. This is your gain switch, and we're gonna set this up in the menu. The next one over is your white balance switch. This right here is, as I said already, is disabled. It doesn't really do anything in the way we're gonna set this camera up. Right here is your audio inputs. You want to usually leave this on manual. You can connect some XLR audio on the other side of the camera, and you can adjust the audio levels right here. Usually, however, you would want to record your audio into an external audio recorder. You're going to get better signals. And that brings us to this main switch right here, and that's really where we're going to spend some time setting up our camera, right? So we press this button right here for the menu, and then to select anything, we're going to move this wheel up and down and press on this wheel to make any kind of like changes in the Sony menu. Okay, so now our camera is all reset, and we can see in our viewfinder what we have set up here. Not really what we want. Top left, the camera tells us we're at a 60th of a second. where we are also set to 60 frames per second or 59.94. We're set to Ultra HD. We're shooting internally XAVC. So this is definitely not how we want this camera set up. But the good news is that we are all reset, so we know what to do. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna hit our menu button again, and we're gonna go down to our system settings, and we're gonna stay right there on our base settings, and we're gonna first set our base setting from custom to Cine EI, EI standing for exposure index. And you're gonna see that the picture is gonna change quite a bit. There we go. And now we set to a log color gamut. So, and that means that we have a significantly flatter, let me just show this to you, we have now a significantly flatter look than we had before, which is a good thing. We want that because we don't want to clip any of those highlights. If we want to make the picture look like we had it before, that's really easy to do in post. But if we're clipping out our highlights, then it will never be recorded and we can never get them back. So we want this picture to look this flat. There are also different S-logs in there, S-log2, but we do want to stick with the Cine S-log3 because that's pretty much the flattest that this camera can shoot. Okay, we're going to go down to the codec, and right now we're set to shooting external XAVC. Now we don't really want that. What we want to do is we actually want to shoot RAW on an external recorder. You can set, if you want to back up, you can record RAW and internally into the camera. Beware though that when you do select that, the maximum resolution you can record internally will be high definition, 1920 by 1080. You still get your full 4K RAW recording. So having a backup is not a bad idea. It will increase your file size, obviously, because you're now shooting it twice. But it's a good thing to have. So I am gonna select that. Okay. Now that that is done, I'm going down to the record format. We don't have access to the size of the video format that records internally. That's 1920 by 1080. But we do want to make a change for the raw output format. We are set to 4K, which is correct. But you can see right there, we're set to 59.94 frames per second. So technically 60 frames per second. We really don't want to do that. We want to shoot at 24. In this case, we can set this camera to 23.98, which, higher end cameras can actually be set. You can choose between 23.98 or 24. In this case scenario, you can only choose 23.98. Also, by the way, it's really not 23.98, it's 23.976 frames per second. But a few years ago, manufacturers started to round this up to 23.98. So just don't be puzzled as to why there is even another frame rate. It is 23.976. Okay, we're gonna choose that. So now you can see that the camera has reset again after we did this. And you can see on the top right, underneath the battery display where it says 80%. So we're set to record internally 1920 by 1080. We are set to record 23.98 frames per second. We're set to record XAVC-I, so the higher resolution of XAVC. Internally, we're set to record S-log3, and we're recording external RAW in 4K. This is exactly what we want. Now on the top left, it tells us our shutter speed. If we're now pressing the shutter speed button on the outside of the camera, then all the different shutter speeds will come up. However, it's 24 frames per second, 1/48 of a second is the correct shutter speed, so we are going to leave it right there. Now we're gonna go back into the camera menu, and we're gonna go one down to camera. And the first adjustment we're gonna do is we're gonna make an adjustment in ISO gain EI. So right here you have the various different exposure index settings, which are, you know, the higher the setting, ultimately the more light sensitive your sensor gets, but at the same time also your image is going to get grainier. And that can be really a problem when that switch gets hit accidentally. So I showed you that switch on the outside that says L, M, and H, which stands for low, medium, and high. And the dilemma right there is when this is switched accidentally while shooting, it's something that you know, tends to be overlooked, and then you know, a while later somebody recognizes it, and then the question is, how much did we shoot with this setting in the wrong place? Now the reason why it's there is because, remember, this camera is really at its core a ENG camera, and for electronic news gathering it's important to have this switch there, because when it comes to the news, it's important to get the picture. It's not so important that the picture is really good looking. In our case scenario though, as filmmakers, we want this picture to be really good looking. So what I do is I set this to foolproof. And that means I go into the medium setting, and the nominal ISO of this camera is 800. So I set this to 800, just like the low setting right here. And then I go to the high setting, and I also set this to 800. And now it doesn't matter where the switch is flicked to, it's always going to be 800, and it's just one of those things I no longer have to worry about. If I want to change my ISO now, I actually have to go into the menu, and I have to change this in the menu. The flicker reduce setting is something that can come in handy if you're shooting, let's say, a night exterior with some street lights or fluorescent lights. Something is flickering, then you can potentially turn this on or even turn it to auto. Right now I'm going to leave it off. The main thing though is that you need to know what the frequency is, meaning in which country you're shooting. So in the United States your frequency will be 60. If you are filming, however, let's say in China or in Europe, then you would set this to 50 Hertz. So most of the rest of the world is 50 Hertz, but in the United States or in Canada, you would want to shoot at 60 Hertz. Okay. So we're gonna, the paint menu is essentially disabled because we are shooting raw. Audio, this is if you would be running audio into the camera, you can set up your inputs right here. However, most of the time when we're shooting films, we're not recording into the camera, we're recording into the into a designated sound recorder. Right here in your video settings, there's a few things that you need to kind of like be careful of, particularly this thing here, right? That monitor LUT. Students have made the mistake to turn this on and then ended up recording the LUT into the monitor thinking that they were recording log. My recommendation would be to never set the camera to output a LUT. Instead, go and set your monitor to display a LUT. Any decent monitor will be capable of displaying a LUT, and you can even load LUTs into them, and then you just press a button on that monitor to see a LUT, and you can be sure that you're not going to have any problems of potentially recording, baking in a LUT into your footage. This is something you really don't want to do. Here are the various viewfinder settings. Really, most of the stuff we don't need to bother with because we are we're setting this up in our onboard monitor / recorder. One thing you might want to consider are right here. When it comes to display markers, you might want to consider your frame guides. I'm sorry, right here in your markers, you might want to consider your frame guides right there for your aspect ratio. But otherwise, it's probably better to leave your viewfinder relatively uncluttered. Leave the stuff in there that's in there by default, but otherwise you kind of want this uncluttered. Timecode setting, by default your timecode is going to be set to record run. What that means is that you press the run button and the numbers start to count. However, if you are using multiple cameras, or you're using a higher end sound recorder that also can record the time code, then you should set the camera to free run. Okay. Now, what does this mean? If I go out of here now and show you in the viewfinder, on the bottom left is your time code, and now you can actually see we're not recording and yet the time code is running. And that's called free run. And this helps when let's say you're having, imagine you're shooting a music video with multiple cameras. It would be very difficult potentially later on to actually sync up those cameras because you're really not recording sound with them. And to get all of them in sync to lip sync, for the lip sync of the singer who's doing a playback, this would be problematic. So now you have the timecode on free run, and you can use a camera or a timecode slate or what's called a lock-it box, and you can essentially input that time code or send the time codes to every single one of your cameras and all of your equipment. So now your sound recorder, your time code slate, and all your cameras are running on the same time code, which makes it really easy to handle this type of footage in post. So in this case scenario, you would want to set this to free run. I'm going to leave this at record run now because, you know, most likely you will be using an external recorder, but it's going to probably be an H-series zoom recorder. H-series zoom recorders cannot have timecode fed in. For that, you would need an F-series zoom recorder, which is, you know, it's a higher quality recorder. If you are recording with record run, what I tend to do is I start mine like this. So then ultimately I'm just starting with the number 1, and every time I change a drive, I add a number. So that way I can see what you know a drive the footage came from just by looking at the time code. The only one thing you got to watch out for is that you don't record more than an hour onto a drive. But most drives won't record that much anyway. All right. Media is, you know, we are recording internally, so it is really important that we are formatting our media. So we're going to do this right now. We're going to format media B as well. So this wipes the footage off and, you know, formats the drive so it is ready to receive footage. You always want to do this in camera, not you know, on a computer. That's the best way of getting corrupted drives. So always format in camera. Okay, so under camera, I was looking for this. So there's the auto black balance. This is something that's important. You do want to do a black balance by the beginning of every single day. So what a black balance is, for the lack of a better way of explaining it, it's a cleaning of your sensor, an electronic cleaning of your sensor. try to do this by the beginning of every single day or every time when you set up that camera. To explain this better, you know what a dead pixel is. Now, a dead pixel can be caused by a defect, and it's a factory job. But a dead pixel can also just be caused by heat or a magnetic field. And camera sensors do actually get quite hot. So if that overheats, it is possible that your sensor is going to end up with some artifacts, and those would be recorded into your shots. And we don't want that. So because of that, we are doing a black balance by the beginning of every single day. It's important that you are covering your lens when you do that. So it's got to be black, because you're telling your camera now that what each single pixel is seeing is black. Once the lens is covered, we're gonna execute the black balance. Okay, and we're gonna go back into our menu. Now we can just go on to all the way into the system and check for a few more settings right there. One thing that I tend to do is I tend to turn the so-called record lamp off. This is essentially a red light. This is more of a television thing. You know, it's not going to be an issue if you're using this in a brightly lit environment. But theoretically, if you're close, in a dark environment and you're close to an actor, you could have that red, it's called a tally light. You could have that potentially show up in your actor's eyes. And, just to be on the safe side, I turn this off. I don't need it. Fan control, usually you want to leave this on auto, so if the camera does get too hot, the fans will kick in. And really everything else, a lot of it is self-explanatory. If you do want to make some changes, like language or whatnot, make sure you set it back before you return the camera. But for the most part, really we are now set up in our menu to record RAW onto our external recorder. Now the thing that we still have left to do is we have to still set up our external recorder. But we're done with the Sony menu. So now that we have set everything up, we're going to put on our RAW recorder, which is also our external monitor. This right here is an Odyssey monitor, and it is capable of recording 4K RAW, which is what we're using it for. To put it onto the camera, we're going to screw on a Noga arm. There are points on either side as well as in the back, so I'm just going to use the one in the back right here. So to do this, you got to make sure that Noga arm is locked. Screw this, screw those little screws all the way to the bottom, and then just screw it on. There are also, if you are thinking of buying something like this, there are quick release mounts which really come in very handy and are not rather inexpensive, so you don't have to do it this way. Now we're going to put the same thing here onto the camera. Now we just screw this on until it's tight. Okay, so now we have our monitor on. Let me adjust the frame here a little bit. So to connect it, we're going to use an SDI cable, which we can put into one of our inputs right here. And this now is really important. And this is one of those things where a lot of students get this wrong. These right here are monitor outputs, but not raw recording outputs. Your raw recording output is right here. Remember, this is the raw output module. That's the only reason why we put this on there, is so we can output raw. So this is where we're going to connect it. Says it right there too, raw out. Okay, and next we're going to need power to our monitor. So the power connector goes right in here. By the way, there's a little release button to when you're disconnecting it, so make sure that you're not yanking on it. And then this plugs either here into the battery or the battery plate right here, which is better, so you don't have to unplug it every time you're pulling the battery. So there's a couple on top, as well as there's one on the side here. So these are called D-taps. So we're just gonna plug this in here to power our monitor. And now all we need to do is turn on the camera, and hopefully we're gonna have a picture. And now for this setup, I'm gonna bring you closer so you can see the Odyssey menu. So the first thing that's likely to happen is that you don't actually get an image on your Odyssey. And that is probably because it is not set up for raw input. In order to do so, you press this little gear icon right here, and then you're gonna, it will automatically come up with setup. And you can see right here, it is Sony FS7 FS raw to raw.dng. Now, if this is set to a different camera, and if you're using this monitor with a different camera, you need the codec installed for a different camera, which, by the way, needs to be paid for separately. And then it has to be set up in here. So in this case scenario, you press onto your camera selection. Now all of these camera selections come up. You can see various different Sony cameras, Canon, ARRI, Panasonic, Red, etc. So all of this is there. So now you need to select the camera that you want, which in this case is our FS7, and it's already selected. And now we have all those different types of choices right there. And these choices are, essentially a whole bunch of them. We could just do camera internal. For this, we do not need this monitor. But this is the important thing. Raw to raw .dng. So a .dng is, DNG stands for digital negative. That is the file type that we want. That is what we want to record. Once this is set up, if we were to set this up right now, it would ask us, it was reset, and it could take, up to 5 minutes to do this entire reset. And after that, you're going to get a picture. So, but since this is already set up right now, we're fine, and we can just leave it there. Okay, also up here, it's going to tell you that we're shooting at 23:9:8 at 4K, which is good. There is, it tells us we're shooting FS7 RAW. Right here, we're set to camera trigger, which is also a good thing, but let me just show this to you. So right here, again, under the little gear symbol, we have this record trigger selection. And we can either choose a record button, which is now here on the monitor, or we can choose the camera, which is, if we're now pressing the record button on the camera, the recorder will automatically start recording. Since we've set the camera to record also camera internal as a backup file, this is a really good thing of doing this, because you don't you don't want to forget to have to, you don't want to have to hit 2 buttons for recording and forget one. So here you just have 1 button to hit, and you're all good. So this is a very good way of setting this up. The next one over, this shows you how much time you have left on each one of those drives. Now the Odyssey records onto solid state drives, and these are, there's no difference really with those drives than from something that you would put into your laptop computer, and they just click up in here. And the first thing we're going to do, just like we did in the camera, is we're going to format them. So we're going to click on this time right there, and right up here comes erase and format. So we're going to click erase and format, and in this case you can choose SSD 1 or SSD 2 or both. We want to do this with both, which will wipe our drives. So we're going to click OK, and this is now going to format our drives. Okay, and I think we're done. So now you can see that we have on each one of those drives, which are 256 gigabytes, we have 12 minutes of raw to record. This is, at first glance, this may seem to be very little time, but believe me, having 24 minutes essentially of recording space is plenty. And you wouldn't want to have a drive in there where you can record hours and hours, and then all of a sudden something is wrong with this drive. Now, one thing that generally gets people is that if we were to shoot it onto here, and we were just to pull these drives out and put it into the reader and connect this to the computer, no files would show up. And the reason for this is that they have not been properly ejected. So to eject this drive, you have this little triangle up top here. We need to click that, and right here you can choose safely eject 1, safely eject 2, or safely eject both. Now, if you by accident pull this out and you forget to do that, don't worry about it. It's not a catastrophe. All you need to do is put it back in there, safely eject it, and your files will be there. This is our setup up top. Now we're going to look at some of the functions of the monitor on the bottom. On the left-hand side, the second one in, we have our guides. So let's say we want to shoot this in widescreen. So we would now choose our 23921, and you can just see right there our guides just popped up. Now the other thing is, right now we are displaying, let me put a little more exposure on this. We are right now displaying a log file, or the log that's coming out of the camera. If we would want to have a LUT on it, a lookup table, then we, there's a whole bunch of presets in there. You can also load some in here, but for example, if we are now, if we're scrolling down here, we come to our Sony LUTs, and right there on the bottom is S-Log3, which is actually what the camera is filming. So now we have set this to S-Log3 LUT display. So we're seeing more of a finalized image than we would otherwise be seeing. I have a tendency to leave it off, and on occasion toggle it on. I don't always leave my LUT on. There's also a focus assist function, which let me see if we can get this picture in focus. So it's this red fringing that you're seeing right here. Be careful though to rely on this too much, because it really works with contrast, and sometimes something can actually be slightly out of focus and still have a contrast to it and still show up. To double check your focus, you're really better off using your zoom right here. So if we're zooming in, This is a 1:1, and you can hold this, and now you can, choose your zoom factor. So right there's, for example, 8:1 hyper zoom. So we actually right now see on the bottom right that zoomed in area, and I can actually move my fingers. Let's move up to that screw head right here. So you can see right there, I moved with my finger up here, and now I can very nicely, focus on that screw. So look how nice and sharp I've got that screw right now. And I know now I'm definitely in focus up here. For exposure, we have the false color settings right here. The way this works is that what's in the middle right here, what's green is medium gray. So if I'm adjusting my iris, you can see that I'm now increasing my exposure. When it's red, it is overexposed to a point of loss of detail. So this is too much. So yellow is still okay. You want to give it a lot of exposure, but you don't want to overexpose it. You don't want it to go red. Another way are the zebras, but I'm not going to touch upon those, because since we have false color and since we have a waveform, this is really what matters. So the waveform is something that I'm going to turn it on full screen right now so you can see it. So as I'm adjusting my iris here again, the picture gets darker, the picture gets brighter. And what you don't want to have happen is you don't want anything to hit the top line, right? When that happens, we are clipping, which means we're recording empty white. So, but you do actually want to record your image as bright as possible before you start to clip. So, which means that you're having as little noise as possible. So this right here would be a fairly good exposure for the shot. Again, then in post, if we can make it dark in post, that's not a problem. But right now, even if you want it dark, you wouldn't want to shoot it down here because you're going to record a lot of noise. So it's always good to give your sensor a lot of image information and record it right up here. Of course, you still want to use your light meter, but it's kind of, you're setting up your light meter and calibrating it together with your waveform towards your camera to make sure that your readings are correct. So this is a really good tool to have on this camera. And this, in a nutshell, concludes the setup or the raw setup for the FS7. I hope this helped you out, and good luck on shooting your movies.
Body, 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 body,